Before you can start hacking into your target VM, you will need to make some changes both to Debian and to the target VM. And you might also need to make some changes to VirtualBox. To start with, go to the File menu and then choose Host Network Manager. And hopefully what you will see here is that you already have a VirtualBox host-only Ethernet adapter in this list. You should make sure that you have Configure Adapter manually selected and that the IPv4 address in here is 192.168.56.1, and that should be the default. You should also have a network mask as follows. And if you click on DHCP server, this should be enabled, and the server address here should be 56.2. We should have the same server mask here, and the lower address bound should be set to 3 and the upper address bound set to 254, all within the same IP range. And this is the default setting, so you shouldn't have any issues here. Just in case you don't already have a virtual Ethernet adapter in this list here, you can quite easily make one by clicking on Create, and then you will need to accept the user account control dialog that appears, so click Yes. You'll see that this adds a new network adapter. And then if you click Properties here, you might have to click it a couple of times. You'll have the options here to set the adapter, and notice how the IPv4 address isn't what it was before. So I'm just going to change that to 56.1. Everything else is the same. DHCP server, enable server, and I'm going to set this to 56. The server mask is fine, and I'm going to change the lower and upper address bounds. Now, the DHCP server, or the Dynamic Host Configuration Protocol server, is responsible for handing out IP addresses to any virtual machine that connects to this network, and that works just the same way as your home router does. So the first virtual machine that is on this network will have this IP address here, the lower address bound, 56.3, and subsequent virtual machines will have subsequent addresses like .4, .5, .6, and so on. So once you've checked all this is correct, make sure that the DHCP server is enabled. It's a bit strange because you can click it here and they don't necessarily tally up. Make sure that you've got the correct settings in. Hopefully you shouldn't need to do this, and the defaults will already match up. Click Apply and then Close. Now that you've got that host network configured, we need to actually connect the virtual machines to it. So we'll start with Debian. If you make sure you've got Debian selected here and then click on Settings, and then go to Network, and Adapter 1 under Network will already be set up, and it says here attached to NAT. And that is how your Debian VM was able to access the internet earlier. And you don't want to make any changes to this adapter. You want to leave that exactly how it is. Instead, click on Adapter number 2, enable that network adapter, and then choose Host Only Adapter from this drop-down box. And you should find that you only have one option here, which will already be selected. So click OK. Now that I've added that Host Only Network adapter to my Debian VM, I'm going to add another snapshot. Host Only Adapter added. OK. And then I'm going to start my Debian machine. And while I'm waiting for that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to make the same change to this Metasploitable 2, this target VM. Go to Network, enable Network Adapter. This time, we don't want this Network Address Translation Adapter. We want Host Only Adapter. Click OK. And then I can start this machine as well in the background. I'm going to use headless start here. We already tested to make sure that that machine boots. So I'm going to use headless start and then switch back to Debian. You can click the show button there. I'm going to log in. I'll open a terminal. And then if you use the command IPA, let me just try and get that text a little clearer. What you will see with that command is a list of network interfaces. The first one here is the loopback device, and that just allows the machine to connect to itself. You have here ENP0S3, and this is the NAT adapter that we used earlier to connect to the internet. And below that, you have a new interface here, ENP0S8. And this here is the host-only network adapter. And you know that because of the IP address, 192.168.56.6. Right, let's see if we can connect to the target VM now. So I'm going to clear my screen with the clear command. And then I'm going to use Nmap, which you installed earlier, using the SN option. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to type in an IP address 56.0/24, and the SN command will perform something known as a ping sweep, and it will try to discover any hosts that have the IP address in the range that I've specified here. And that /24, I won't go into the specifics right now, but that just basically means from 0 to 255, like so. We will run that scan, and in theory, what should happen is you should see two hosts. We've got 192.168.56.6 and 192.168.56.7. One of those is this Debian VM, and the other one is your target VM. And if you remember, you can see here the IP address of the Debian VM 56. So this 192.168.56.7 must be the target, and you can get some further validation by performing another Nmap scan, this time without any arguments, and this time supplying only one IP address. And there you have a very basic port scan of the target VM, which shows lots of different services running on that VM and lots of open ports waiting for incoming connections. You can see here that there's an HTTP service on port 80, so another way to check and see what's going on with this vulnerable virtual machine very easily is to type in the IP address up here in your web browser. Let's just specify the HTTP protocol, and here we go. We've got a little introduction there. Never expose this VM to an untrusted network. And it looks like we've got a few additional web applications running on here, which I suspect will all be incredibly vulnerable. Just a quick note on your network interfaces. You might see that you do have an IP address for your first interface, but that you don't have one for your host-only network interface here. So you would just need to use that command, as I showed you before, but replace the device name with whichever device does not currently have an IP address. And if it does already have an IP address, you'll probably see something like that. A word of warning here, don't use Nmap to scan the internet. It's a legal grey area, and I really wouldn't recommend it. You could get yourself into some trouble. When I first started hacking and using tools like Nmap, I was worried that I might do something like accidentally perform some sort of scan, or even, launch an attack without meaning to. If you are worried about accidentally scanning the internet, or mistyping an IP address or something like that, what you can do is you can go to the settings of the VM, your Debian VM that is, go to network, and you can actually unplug the cables for your virtual adapters. If you go to adapter 1, the NAT adapter, and click on cable connected here, so I've removed that tick, click OK, and what that means is we've effectively unplugged this VM from the internet. So even if I did scan Google, and again, I wouldn't recommend even doing this for demonstration purposes, what will happen is nothing, because we simply don't have an outbound connection to the internet anymore. Okay, there you go. Failed to resolve google.co.uk. So Nmap couldn't do the DNS lookup because we didn't have an internet connection. It's completely up to you whether you disable that network adapter when you're performing things like Nmap scans and running other tools inside this virtual environment. But if you do, just remember that you won't be able to update your system either. So if I try it, you will get an error message. But it's quite handy because you can just go to the settings whilst the machine is running, and while you cannot make changes to everything, you can plug that cable back in, click OK, and let's try that again. There we go, it works this time. If you can run an Nmap scan against the target VM and you get a list of open ports like that, then you can be sure that you have configured everything correctly and you are now ready to start hacking.